Hello, listeners. Been wondering how you can help the show? Probably not. But here are 5 things you can do. 1. Subscribe. Support the show by clicking the subscription link in the show notes. 2. Review on iTunes, on our website, www.afraidofnothingpodcast.com, or on whatever app you listen to. 3. Donate. When you go to our website, click the cute coffee cup icon. Or in the show notes, click the subscription link. 4. Share. Sharing really is caring. Tell your friends and even your enemies to check out the show. 5. Watch. Wait a minute, it's a podcast, not a movie. Actually, it's both. Check the show notes to find out where to watch the documentary. You can also rent it on Prime Video. That's it. Oh, one last thing. Enjoy this episode. Tonight's episode is sponsored by Podcorn. And also a request. Like, subscribe, and review the podcast. I'll be uploading them on a regular basis in 2021, every other Wednesday. So at the crack of midnight on Tuesday, you'll have a fresh episode every other Wednesday. Thanks again. Like, subscribe, and review. And now, on to tonight's show. With our most popular episode of all time, we bring back Rob Gutro to discuss his new book, Pets and the Afterlife 3.
In a world where nothing is known, nothing is certain, reality is not real. Wake up! Be afraid of nothing. I'm Bob Heskey.
Robert.
The host with the ghost.
This is my podcast, based on my paranormal documentary, Afraid of Nothing. Each episode, we talk to people who see life and the afterlife through a different lens. Join me.
Who is this large man? And what's he doing in our bedroom?
As we lift the veil and open our minds to see beyond our eyes lie. This is Afraid of Nothing. Nothing.
3 times is a charm. We're here back with Rob Gutro. This is his 3rd time on my podcast. Which actually is the most by any guest. And coincidentally, we're going to talk about his book, Pets in the Afterlife 3. Hey, Rob, welcome to the show.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me back. It's good to be back.
Yeah, always love having you. We were talking before the show. You are by far and away the numero uno most popular episode. You have, as of tonight's recording, like 1,650 downloads,
Wow.
which for a small podcast like mine is a lot, okay? And the nearest competitor isn't within barking distance. It's like 500 or 600. So
Good point.
you are way, way ahead. I'm sure this one will gather as much interest. So before we talk about the new book, you're always like during the week, it's family time, you have your normal job and all that good stuff. On the weekends, you do kind of address questions that you get about the paranormal. And you mentioned you've had recently 2 interesting stories happen. Do you mind sharing those?
Not at all. So, so as a medium, that means I can get messages from people and pets who passed. And it's really like a telepathic thing. So recently I got a couple of questions for readings, one about a cat, one about a dog. And these are really good examples of how pets can give very highly personal signs to let their pet parent know that it's really them that's coming through. So would you like to hear about the cat first or the dog?
Let's do the cat, because the rest of the show would be about dogs. Let's just give cats a little first entree.
Okay, sounds good. All right. So this happened just yesterday, actually. A woman named Ingrid had written to me about her cat, and her cat's name is Buddy. And she said that her cat had passed. And I'm actually really just consolidate these stories, but there was a lot to the reading. Anyway, not only did the cat tell me about his health problems before he passed and his personality, but he mentioned a certain word. And I didn't recognize the word as an English word. The word was mala, M-A-L-A. And he said it to me several times. And when I get these messages and I can't make sense of them, I just write them down in an email and I just think, oh my gosh, these people are going to think I'm crazy and not going to be able to understand this. Lo and behold, Ingrid wrote me right back and she confirmed the personality. She confirmed the way that the cat passed. And she said she is blown away from the word mala. And the reason is that the cat really lived in her room. And in her room, she has a little altar. And she always did a meditation, and it's called the mala meditation.
Wow.
And she said only the cat would know that because she never talked about it to anybody else. So that's pretty amazing.
Wow.
That a cat can convey that one specific word.
Is that the first time that you've had that happen to you, or?
Oh no, it's happened quite a few times.
Really?
With numbers in the Pets in the Afterlife 3 book. There's a story about a dog that shared a number that was highly significant.
Okay.
But it blew me away because that's the first time it was a word that I didn't understand. The other interesting sign was from a dog. And this gentleman named James wrote me and told me about his dog, Winnie, that had passed. And Winnie was she was very personable and very intelligent. And one of the things that really stood out from the signs and the messages that Winnie gave me was that Winnie's on the other side with a woman named Liz. And she specifically said, Liz. And then she said that she showed me a tartan skirt or a piece of tartan clothing. And, that's like a Scottish plaid. Again, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is not going to make any sense to him at all. I wrote him and he wrote me back the next day. And he said, I talked to my wife and told her about the reading and she was astounded. And he said, my wife brings over her phone and brings up a picture of her and her friend Liz, who recently passed away. And in the picture, Liz is wearing a tartan skirt.
That is great.
He was pretty astounded. So was I. So, these are just odd things to me. I mean, they mean nothing to me. But pets are so observant that they can convey the most intimate details to let us know that they are there.
Yeah, those are incredible. You have a lot of great stories in your new book as well. I just downloaded it last night. I've been kind of devouring it. It's called Pets in the Afterlife 3. And I know you've been asked this probably on many other podcasts, but just for our audience, how is this book different from the prior two books?
Well, this book is different because it focuses only on messages from dogs. The other books focus on messages from dogs and cats, some birds and some horses. The first book contains more of the science. Because I'm a scientist at my day job, science is really important to me. So the science of behavior, the science of learning, and also science that has proven that dogs and cats have the same emotions people have. So I cite all of those studies in the first book, and then I summarize them in book 2 and 3. Book 1 also contains chapters from 3 mediums that had experiences with their dogs. And one of them is Ruthie Larkin, one of your past guests and my personal friend.
Yep.
How she had messages from her dog, Boston. Pets in the Afterlife 2 contains stories from readings that I did and also from personal events that happened to people that shared them. And Pets 3 is a combination of those kinds of stories, my readings and other events that have happened to people. But this one focuses on dogs because I'm a dog dad.
You wrote this during 2020, which was kind of especially hard for you as you lost 2 dear pets during that time. So was writing this book kind of an emotional process? Was it cathartic or kind of both when you did it?
It was both. But I will tell you the hardest 2 chapters I had to write were about the passing of our 16-year-old dachshund Franklin and our almost 16-year-old Weimaraner Dolly. And we lost them in May and October, respectively. So it was only 5 months between the time the 2 passed. And both of them actually passed because in their old age, a disc slipped out of their spine and rendered their back legs useless. And they were incontinent. And the dachshund was in pain. So we had to do the right thing.
Yeah, they are both memorialized on the cover of your book. Let's just take a quick moment and do a shout out for the artist who did the cover for your book because it's awesome.
Yeah, covers by Lisa, or Got You Covered. I gave her like 50 pictures of Franklin and Dolly, and I told her I wanted a picture of what looked like a rainbow bridge. And she came up with the most beautiful cover using 2 of the pictures of Dolly and Franklin and a beautiful bridge with clouds and some diffused sunlight in the back. It's on my cell phone. Yeah, it chokes
Yeah,
me up.
great.
It really does. The point of it is that people use the metaphor of Rainbow Bridge all the time to kind of bring themselves peace with their pets that pass. So I wanted to have that on the front cover of this book.
Now, your book is a little bit different because it's broken into two parts. The first part is understanding and coping with loss and grief.
Mhm.
And the longer part is the trove of its stories of pet communication. So just give our readers a little bit about each section.
Sure. Well, one of the things that I've heard from different readers of Pets 1 and 2 is that I didn't directly give them ways to cope with their grief. And I understand that. So, I just thought that recognizing signs from their pets would be a major comfort. But there's more, because we all cope with grief differently. In this particular book, I tapped a friend of mine, Dr. Charmak, who's a licensed psychologist with 24 years of experience, and he helped write one of the chapters on 11 ways to cope with grief. And this applies to any kind of grief, not just pet loss. So this book will help you if you're going through any kind of loss, especially during these pandemic times that we're in. And then in addition to the 11 things that he cited, I also added 3 other ones that I did when we lost Franklin and Dolly that I felt very helpful.
Yeah, and I thought that was a great part of the book, actually. And I thought it was excellent to have it in there to help people cope with grief. Now, the second half is the longest part, is the stories of pet communications. One of the stories in there is about, which is on our podcast, episode 25, with my friend Dan, where you kidded out of the park. That's one of my favorite ones. I also liked a couple other stories. I like the story about Chico and Coco. Can you talk about that one?
Okay, so I remember that Chico and Coco visited this woman's daughter, this woman named Cindy. They visited her daughter in dreams. And dreams are the easiest way that pets can communicate. So if you are missing your dog, ask them to come into your dreams. And usually within about 2 weeks on either side, they will come into your dreams.
Yeah, that was it. She emailed you about the passing of her 2 dogs. She mentioned that the spirit had made a divine connection. White flowers, she talked about that.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that I got, was that white flowers would be an indication that Chico would be around. Usually whenever a plant blooms that hasn't bloomed before, that's kind of an indication that spirit is helping it out. So white flowers became a sign that Chico and Coco would be with her. And she wrote back and she said that she noticed white flowers, a bouquet of white flowers in her backyard. And she said that, I think she said it was an oleander plant. Oleander,
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that hadn't bloomed. So that was pretty cool.
There's another story I liked about Ginny's Westies solve their mysterious death. So there was a German Shepherd and 4 Westies. And you may not remember all of them, but she wanted to know how they passed. Do you recall that story?
I do recall that. So Ginny had raised Westies I think she had raised Westies for about 20 years. And she had 4 Westies, and I think she had a German Shepherd too. And each of the Westies' deaths were mysterious to her. The first thing that I had to do was I had to get her to send me pictures of each Westie and then tell me individually what their names were. And then I was able to tune into them. And that's really how I work. I do phone readings, except in the case of your friend Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually I do them by email with pictures. So she sent me them one at a time. And she told me that all of her dogs died in a strange way. There was Kisser, Buddy, and Baby. And she wanted to know what happened to them. And she said Kisser was found dead on her back steps. It was 6 years before. So she said that she had left her dogs with a roommate and that one of the dogs wandered off and didn't come back. And I believe that was Buddy.
Yep.
Yeah, they found Buddy in the bushes. But Buddy was still alive. And when they took Buddy to the vet, they couldn't save Buddy. And I think Buddy passed in her arms. But she didn't know what happened to him. Another dog died of kidney failure.
Yep.
And she said that she thought that was odd too, because the dog was healthy just 2 months before. So she didn't really understand what had happened. So her first dog, Kisser, came through to me and said that he passed from eating a poisonous plant. Now, this is a message that I've gotten before from dogs. I think Clancy was a Cocker Spaniel puppy. Clancy's in book 2. And Clancy showed me that he was eating plants in the backyard. When I sent that list of SPCA poisonous plants to dogs to Clancy's mom, she was able to identify several of them. Same thing here with Ginny. So Ginny was able to identify some of them. So that's a warning to all pet parents, really. The other Westie that came through to me told me that he was bitten by a snake. So in my email, when I told Ginny that, my email, I asked her if there were snakes where she lived. And of course, I have no idea where these people live. Absolutely no idea. They just write me and tell me that their dog passed and what happened. And so she said that it made perfect sense to her because she lived in a house that was on 9 acres of land. And most of the land was overgrown with forest. And she was always worried about snakes. So I remember when she wrote me back, she wrote, "Oh my gosh, that makes total sense to me." Right there, she got 2 answers from each of her Westies. So the other one was about Baby. Baby she didn't know if it was misdiagnosed or if something had caused the renal failure. So she didn't know what the answer to that was. But I did tell her that Baby was already experiencing renal failure. And oftentimes, this is important too, is that pets will shield us from seeing that they don't feel good. And they do that for our benefit. It's just like people sometimes. They don't want you to know they're sick. And then at the very last minute, they'll pass or they'll get incredibly sick. And they do that because they don't want to cause others concern. So pets behave just the same way.
They also had a German Shepherd named Dylan who died of heart failure, I think. And when Ginny had a heart scare, I think she saw he appeared in front of her or something. I don't know if you remember that from the book, but that was pretty interesting too.
Yeah, I actually do. And that was the reason that he appeared, because he had the same condition. He wanted to let her know that, he's still watching out for her.
Now, I know it's emotional talking about your 2 dogs. Is it, do you feel comfortable talking a little bit? Because Franklin's story was really good, and so wasn't Dolly's. Do you feel comfortable talking just a little bit about each of them and how they left you messages? Because they really left you some strong. I mean, Franklin was pretty quickly, right? Franklin left you messages pretty soon after he passed.
Yeah, Franklin was pretty much immediate. So was Dolly, actually. And Dolly, the day Dolly passed, there were signs from other spirits that let me know that she was going to pass. So yeah, I'll be happy to talk about both of them.
One cool story was it was like your doppelganger family with Dolly. If you don't mind mentioning that one first, that was a pretty cool story, I thought.
Oh, sure. So after Dolly passed away, I think it was the next day, my friend Jane, who lives in Massachusetts, who lives 400 miles away, sent me a text and said she was so sorry about Dolly and she was thinking about Dolly. And she was out for a walk, and she has lived in the neighborhood she lives in for quite a few years. And she had never before seen a Weimaraner. But that night, she was taking a walk, and out of the woods ran a Weimaraner. And the Weimaraner stopped and stood and stared at her. And she knew right there that Dolly had sent that Weimaraner to let me know that she was okay. And she texted me that, and she was just incredulous over it. She said, "I lived here for years. I've never seen a Weimaraner, let alone one off leash." And so that's what happens. So our pets will send us a doppelganger or a lookalike, if you will, to let us know that they're still with us. And sometimes when we're grieving, grief blocks signs. So our pets will actually send a message through a friend, knowing that the friend will convey that message or that sign to us. And that's exactly what happened with Jane.
Was there a story too about, I don't know, I thought one of your friends saw someone, a similar type of family with a dog that reminded her of you. I don't know if I'm kind of misconstruing the story if it was Dolly, but I thought there was one case where there was a family that was kind of like you and Tom, and they had a dog that was similar.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
This is why I say there's no such thing as coincidences. So you're right. I think it was November 7th. It was it was 14 days after Dolly passed. My friend Emily, that I met through Animal Rescue, sent me a note, and she said, I got the most astounding signs from Dolly. And she said, I just have to tell you, this is the weirdest thing. And this is how spirit works. She said she met a friend at a restaurant. She was sitting outside, and it was dog friendly. And that was this year. I mean, during COVID, they had outdoor dining. She said that she felt a cold nose on her leg, and she looked down, and there was a Weimaraner staring at her. And she hadn't seen Weimaraners before, not in person. She's a dachshund mom. So she said she noticed that the Weimaraner was on a lead, and that the Weimaraner's dad was trying to drag the dog away from her. And what's interesting is that the Weimaraner dad, noticed that she had a black dachshund on her sweater. And so now Tyler is our black dachshund, who is very closely bonded with Dolly.
Oh.
He asked if she had a dachshund, and she said she had two. And he said, we also have two. One is black and tan, and one is dapple. And then she said, I asked him what your Weimaraner's name was. And he said, Dolly Parton, P-A-W-T. Now, my dog Dolly was named after Dolly Parton, because my dog Dolly came from the hills of East Tennessee, from a rescue.
Oh, God. That was great. That was incredible.
She
Yeah.
just wrote, she just wrote in her email, this was way too freaky for me. And she said, but it gets better than that. And I just thought to myself, how in the world could it get any better than that? Then she asked what his name was. And he said his name was Buzz. Buzz was my dog that passed in 2005. And Buzz was also my nickname when I was on the radio for 20 years. And then he said, I'm here with my husband, Tom, which is my husband's name.
Yeah, it's just insane. It's just that was, I read that, Rob, and I was like, wow, this should almost be like, it was great to set it up as a preface, the chapters on Franklin and Dolly, but they were so powerful. It's like they almost should have been at the end, because it was such a great finish. Yeah, that blew me away. And I don't want to use all the tales, but there was a cool story about Franklin where after Franklin passed, when the dogs were lined up for dinner, they left a space where you felt he was, correct?
Yeah, they did. They did. And that proved to me that they could actually see him. So your dogs at home or your cats will do that if they line up for anything, for treats. So yeah, they were lined up for dinner. And also when they were lined up for their 3 treats at night at 8:00, they left a space for him. And I will tell you too, Bob, that spirit dogs and cats can also make noises from the other side. So since Franklin passed, we have heard him bark, his distinct bark, twice. Once Tom was in the TV room, which was like 2 rooms away from the kitchen. And I was outside with the other 3 dogs at that time. And it was the day after, I think, Franklin passed. Tom heard a bark in the kitchen, and he said it sounded like Franklin's bark. When I came in the house with the 3 dogs, he said, where were you? And I said, I was outside with the 3 dogs. I was walking them. And he said, so you weren't here? I said, no. And he said, well, Franklin barked in the kitchen.
Tonight's Afraid of Nothing episode is sponsored by Podcorn. Podcorn is a marketplace connecting fearless podcasters to amazing podcast sponsorship opportunities, such as host-read ads, interview segments, topical discussions, and more. I've had first-hand experience with Podcorn helping me find sponsors for my show, which is great because it helps offset production costs and lets me produce more shows for you. Win, win, win. And working with Podcorn is easy. So if you have a podcast and are searching for a sponsor, look no more. Check out Podcorn. With Podcorn, there's no middleman. Podcasters of all sizes can browse and choose opportunities right on the platform online, set their own rates, and collaborate with brands directly without any exclusivities. You never give up any rights to your podcast, and Podcorn is there to support you at every step and ensure you're protected and compensated for the work that you do for brands. The marketplace mission is to give podcasters transparency, creative freedom, and full control of how and when we monetize. With Podcorn, you never have to be afraid of finding a sponsor and getting paid. Click the link in my show notes to sign up to Podcorn and start browsing sponsorship opportunities after the show.
I think it was it was months after that we were outside with the 3 dogs. The 2 of us were outside with the 3 dogs. And I distinctly heard Franklin's bark, very loud and very clear, coming from within the house in the sun porch. So loud, in fact, that I had to go in the house and look.
Wow. Did the dogs notice? Or is that just kind of, were you just tuned into it?
They were busy like sniffing around in the backyard with Tom.
Yeah.
So no, I was standing near the sun porch and I heard it from inside. And it startled me too. But I had to go in and look. Like, maybe I'll see him.
Yeah, and those were great stories. So I'm gonna do a quick plug here. I just downloaded this last night, and your books are always priced so that people can afford it. I got mine on a Kindle for $3.99, and I'm like, whizzing through it. It's a couple hundred pages. I'm like 140, 150 pages in. Really can't recommend it enough. Not just because it's such a cool topic and pets are so important to people, but it's really, the idea that you have the grief aspect up front, which people need, and a lot of people that share these stories, they're just so, you bring a lot of relief to them, and that's got to be the best thing. Not only that you are correct, like you were with Dan, but the other part, Dan's like this kind of macho guy, and he's like, he was literally almost in tears, and it was with him for like days afterwards when he had that reading with you. So that's just got to be such a cool part of what you do. I know it fills up your weekend, but it's got to be so cool to have that impact on people.
It really is. And I wrote these books purposely to teach people that they can look for their own signs. They really don't need a medium. All they need to do is have an awareness. And they can do that by reading these books and these different stories and figuring out all the different ways that pets communicate. I don't know if you got to the dog that used social media. That's one of my favorite stories.
No, I did not. Feel free to ruin it for me. That's okay. I'll probably get to it, but go ahead, share it with the audience. It'd be great.
So pets can use many different methods to communicate with us, and sometimes they will use spirits of humans, human loved ones, to help them out. And such is the case whenever you find a coin that may have the year of your pet's passing or your pet's birth. When you find those coins, that's an indication that your pet is with you. But this story is not about coins. This is just another incident where a pet in spirit got help from a human spirit. So my friend Dan, I first met him, if you will, giving him a reading a couple of years ago when his little dog Romeo passed away. Now, Romeo is also in the book. Romeo has his own little personal and unique sign, but I won't spoil that one. So after Romeo passed away, Dan had been volunteering at an animal shelter. He's such a caring guy. So he works full time, and then he goes to animal shelters at night and then weekends, and he takes care of dogs. He gives them belly rubs and takes them on walks and does all kinds of things. And that's really a healing thing, by the way, for anybody listening who has lost a pet. If you've lost a pet and you're not ready to adopt, volunteer at a shelter. Just take dogs for walks, even cats. If you, not that a cat will make it easy for you to walk them, but you can still, carry them around just to be with them. So Dan bonded to this one little scruffy dog named Cusco who came into the shelter. I think he was 5 years old, and he had heartworm. He had a serious case of heartworm. So he was being treated for that. So this is also a lesson to everybody to put your dog on heartworm preventative because it can be fatal. Anyway, when COVID hit almost a year ago and everything shut down, the shelter had to basically close. And what they were trying to do is trying to get everybody to foster one of the dogs in the shelter so that they didn't have to have any dogs in the shelter there. He said he couldn't because he works 10 to 12 hours a day. So there was a family that decided to take Cusco in. And he was fine with that, but he still missed that little dog every day. It turns out it does not have a happy ending because over the summer, Cusco passed away from heartworm damage. The damage was so great that he never recovered. But Dan always felt a special bond to this little dog, even though he didn't adopt the dog, but he was the one that gave the dog all the attention. So the shelter put together a little video advertising the different services at the shelter and how to adopt dogs and cats and so forth. And this is where Cusco got some help with social media. And there's no such thing as a coincidence when it comes to spirit. Dan happened to see that video on his Facebook page, and it was stopped. When it came up, the picture frozen on it was that of Cusco, who had passed away months before. And he said, and he wrote me, and he says, "Oh my God, is this a sign?" And he said, "Can you watch this video?" So now that picture didn't come up for me when I brought the video up, by the way. That freeze frame didn't come up for me. And as it turns out, Cusco was featured in the video I think it was 1 minute and 37 seconds or something like that.
Yeah.
And for anybody that uses social media, and freeze frames, you know that usually it's the first couple of frames on a video that are the one that shows up first in a still.
Yep. Yeah.
Not so with Cusco and Dan. And I told Dan, I said, man, your Cusco is getting some help from a human spirit on the other side to let you know that day that he's still very much with you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that brings up another thing. You mentioned a lot of times there is someone on the other side that meets pets, that's human.
Mhm.
And a lot of times there's a human entity that helps pets because maybe they haven't figured it out, who knows, how to connect with their human counterparts on the other side, correct?
Absolutely. And it could be human or it can be animal on the other side. But somebody who is in your family. By the way, it does not have to be somebody that you met in life. It could be a great-great-grandmother that passed long before you were born. So,
Now, in your book, you have this science background, right? You mentioned the scientific studies in the prior books.
Mhm.
I just want to bring out a couple things just to remind some people because I think some are cool and kind of surprising. Somewhere in the book you talked about when someone felt cold air around them, and you being a scientist, you said, it was energy and it slowed down the air molecules or something to that aspect. Could you talk about that? Why we feel cold air when a pet is near us?
sure. So that's a theory that I came up with. I haven't heard anybody else talk about it. But scientifically, when you look at the paranormal, if you watch those ghost hunting shows and so forth, they'll always say there's a cold spot here. Perhaps there's a ghost, or maybe there's a spirit, one who crossed over. But they never explained why. But as a scientist, I thought about this. And fast-moving molecules of air are warm air. So if you go down to Florida, those molecules of air are bouncing all over the place. If you come up to the northeast, Massachusetts, for instance, right now, those molecules of air are barely moving.
Boy, you're right. You fit that right.
With the Arctic air in place. So what happens, my theory is that because spirits and ghosts are beings of energy, they need energy in order to manifest, to get strong enough to give us a message. So what they do is they take the energy of motion, the energy from the motion of the molecules, and by taking that energy out of the equation, they slow the movement of those molecules down. So it goes from warm air to cold air, only in the spot where that entity is. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and if I recall, I think it was Franklin that did this to you, correct? I mean, you kind of felt his presence early on.
Yeah, you have a great memory. I'll tell you that.
Well, I just read it yesterday, so it's not that great, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I lived through it, and I have to think about it. But yes, the night that Franklin passed, it was May 8th, 2020. We were lining the kids up for 3 treats, and I was in the corner of our counters, and that's when I announced that there would be 3 treats. I call it 3 treat time. And as soon as I said that, suddenly it got so cold right where I was standing. I got goosebumps. And I looked at Tom and I said, "Why is it so cold?" And he says, what the heck are you talking about? And I said, "It's freezing right here." So I had to go get a sweatshirt rather, to put over my t-shirt. And I was just freezing. And then I realized that it was Franklin, because right after that is what you mentioned. The other 3 dogs lined up and they left a space for Franklin.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. You mentioned that when we die, we have a choice to become a spirit or a ghost. Do you mind just, educating again, what's the difference between a spirit and a ghost?
Yes.
And also, when dogs die, they tend to, almost all of them, become spirits, and why you think that is.
Sure. I'll be happy to touch on that. So the foundation of my very first book, which is Ghosts and Spirits, is an idea that I came just from observing my interactions with those on the other side. And in the paranormal field, people have often referred to ghosts as either ghosts or spirits. And I just thought, you know what? That's not right, because the ones that have crossed over have to have a different name. We just can't call them like entities or our loved ones or whatever, because it doesn't really identify what they are. So what happens after we die is that the energy, the physical energy that's within us, couples with memories, personality, and knowledge. That energy and consciousness makes a choice to stay here, and that would be a ghost. They stay at a fixed location of their choosing, usually one that they're familiar with, like a home Or in the case of a sudden death, maybe at a hospital or a prison or on the side of a road where they died in an accident. Ghosts are earthbound. Spirits are that same energy that crosses over and joins the energies of the cosmos or heaven or the other side, basically. There's also another difference, Bob, and that is the energies that they use. There's a similarity and a difference. Similarity is that they both use physical energies of heat, light, water, and electricity. For instance, if you are on a paranormal investigation, you may see all the batteries drain in your flashlight. That's an earthbound ghost absorbing all of the energy in those batteries. Spirits can do that too. The water part, by the way, explains why most towns that have a river running through them are extremely haunted, like Ellicott City, Maryland, for instance. Very haunted. They also use emotional energies. And here's the difference. Ghosts use negative emotional energy to get strong enough to communicate. That's fear, anxiety, depression, anger, things like that. Spirits use faith, love, and hope. So therein lies the difference. They're both beings of energy. They both use the same physical energies. They use different emotional energies to get strong enough to communicate. And what was the second part of your question?
A very high percentage that you felt of dogs make the choice to become spirits versus ghosts, where it's probably not as high as for humans. And I just wondered what your hypothesis was why that is.
Two things. Although our loved ones will be on the other side calling us to cross over into the light, humans are a lot more stubborn. Pets, on the other hand, they are more emotive and more sensitive, and they can sense love and peace and kindness. And they willingly go to people that show love and peace and kindness. They tend to be a lot less stubborn. I mean, granted, some of them are stubborn, like dachshunds can be very stubborn in life, but ultimately, though, they are of pure heart. So they know where the best place is. Humans, on the other hand, they can be very stubborn and they can choose to stay for one reason or the other. So that's why most pets cross over.
Now, you mentioned, I think in one of your prior books, Science, that dogs and cats tend to be, their growth is like equal to like a human being 3 to 5 years old, like a toddler, right?
Yes.
So when dogs are about to die, do they know that death is coming, and are they afraid, or what are they? I know you feel a lot what happens when pets pass over. Are they afraid of what's happening to them, or do they just don't understand what's happening to them?
No, they do understand what's happening to them. And honestly, they don't seem to be afraid of it. In fact, a lot of them welcome the peace of it. Often when I do a reading from a pet who passed, they will tell me they were in pain and they knew that once they let go, that they would be free of pain, so that they would look forward to it. In fact, many of them come through and thank their pet parent who helps them cross over. So there's a piece that humans don't have. We haven't quite figured that out yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, what a gift for dogs then, because to be able to, at that time, to not have fear and to embrace the transformation, that is such a huge part of probably death, to make it easy on a person going through that.
Yeah, and I watched that with our dog Dolly too. She just let me know that she had just given up. She's like, I just want to go. My body's not working anymore. I'm really tired. I've really tried in the last year to stay as long as I could. I mean, she was in diapers. She was incontinent with number 1 and number 2 for a year.
Wow.
So even Ruthie called me with a reading from Dolly, which was fascinating, which is also included in the book. And Ruthie, of course, pegged things right off the bat. And she said, yeah, she was tired. She stayed as long as she possibly could. And I realized that. It was hard. But she was tired. She wanted to go. And that's generally what dogs tell us.
Now, was Franklin named after someone? I know, Dolly Parton. Was Franklin named after anyone in particular? Or?
No, actually. Tom adopted Franklin just before we met. And I adopted Dolly just before we met. Interestingly enough. Tom likes to name dogs after presidents.
Oh, okay.
So it was Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
That's great.
And we have a dog named Tyler. He's named after President Tyler.
It doesn't seem right to do an episode without mentioning your first dog, Buzz, who died in a very tough accident. And you actually suffered a lot of guilt. You probably could have used that coping stuff before, way back when that happened. But when Buzz passed, you had some guilt, but he also brought you a lot of gifts. So you mind just telling us about that experience at a very high level?
Sure. Yeah, it was the most traumatic event of my life, really. But before I tell you about it, I will tell you that I realize now, it's like 16 years later, that Buzz has not, his sacrifice, his short life has helped me bring peace and comfort to thousands of people around the world. So he is a tremendous healer. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, and by the way, you're not exaggerating when you say that number. We know I
Yeah.
can vouch. You definitely there's in the 4 digits at least. Yeah, and that's a tremendous gift.
Yeah. So I'm so grateful to him. So what happened back in 2005 was just a regular dog walk with him and roommate's dog, and his leash opened when he saw another dog cross the street, and he darted out in the street, and there was a car speeding, going way too fast in a neighborhood as usual, and it just killed him instantly. And
he was 7 months old. How old was he? He was young, right?
7 months. Yeah, he was a puppy. But immediately, well, after I got home, so my roommate came, neighbors came out. I have to tell you that I will never forget that day. I mean, not only but for the trauma, but for the beautiful big hearts of total strangers who came to my aid. It's very emotional still, even 16 years later. This woman whom I wound up befriending, named Sandra. She lives in Alabama now. She moved down there. She was doing a paper route, and she saw what had happened, and she pulled her car over, and she immediately came to me, and she stayed with me. She stayed with me until my roommate was able to get off of work and come. I must have stayed there, 2 hours at the sidewalk. And all the neighbors helped put Buzz's body in a truck and drove it back to my house. I have never forgotten her, and I'm still very close friends with her. And what's really weird too is that she and I share the same birthday.
Wow.
Which is really weird. But anyway, so that said, Buzz had all kinds of signs for me right from the get-go. So I walked in the door, and the radio was playing, and I didn't have the radio on when I left, which is weird. Sometimes radios go on if you set them, but I don't remember ever setting the radio. And the first song that came on was Garth Brooks' The Dance, which is a song about a man who loved very deeply and then appreciated the short time he had with somebody, and then it was over. So it was a very appropriate song. The next thing I clearly remember is that I drove Buzz's body to the vet, and some friends of mine met me there, and we all stood in the parking lot as the vet took him in and, prepared him for just a final goodbye. And spirits can move things. And I didn't think about any of this stuff. I didn't know any of this stuff. Buzz taught me all this. We were standing next to a trash can with a lid firmly on. There was nobody else around. Nothing. And the lid popped up, probably shot in the air about 4 feet. And I looked at everybody and I said, "That's Buzz. Buzz wants us to know he's okay."
Were you attuned to your psychic abilities as much as you are now, or is this just the start of an evolution of that happening for you?
It was a reawakening, really.
Okay.
So I had them. I knew I had something when I was a teenager because my mother helped confirm it after I saw my granddad. But I kept that kind of buried. I was too busy in life, going to school, trying to find a career, all that stuff. So mediums can mostly block out all of this stuff, unless you get to the point where once you start doing it a lot, sometimes it's harder to block things out. Like when I went to England, and we talked about how I went to England and there were dead people talking to me everywhere.
And that was when your husband, Tom, when he started to first open his psychic eye too, right?
He did. He started picking up dead monks and dead kings in Westminster Abbey. And yeah. So
has his capabilities evolved at all? Or, I mean, he certainly picked up, based on the book, a lot of things about your pets that passed. So he's certainly attuned to that. But has he kind of refined his psychic eye since then? Or
no, I think he's kind of closed his psychic eye.
Yeah.
Because we don't go on investigations anymore because of, COVID-19 19. Yeah, so he's been kind of out of practice, and he's found other things to occupy his time, and that's what happens. If we have this gift, we can either continue to use it, and that kind of refines it, or you just kind of get preoccupied with other stuff.
Yeah, it's for the interview before this one. I interviewed a medium who stopped doing it because it's a medium who stopped. And I kind of asked her the question. She's still actually, it's wide open. I mean, she's wide open to stuff. She stopped doing the mediumship just because people were such a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Their expectations, it was like expecting your car to be tuned. They expected a lot of stuff without, just to be handed to them without like doing any interpretation or whatever. So it was kind of interesting. She stopped doing it because it was just kind of the clientele was just getting to be people that weren't really people that she really wanted to be dealing with or helping. But she still has that capability, and it's with her all the time wherever she goes.
Yeah, so I will say that is a danger, that if you are a medium, that sometimes people will want to take advantage of you. And fortunately, they've been very few and far between. I will say that all of my friends have been extremely respectful, and they never pressure me. I mean, I will offer to help them or give them a reading or whatever if I can, but I haven't run into that. I think in my entire life, I think there was only one person that I didn't know.
Wow.
They kept sending me nasty emails starting on a Monday, and I only do readings on the weekends. And it was every day. I didn't know her, and she sent me nasty emails. They got increasingly more angry by Friday, and she said, "You're obviously a scammer," and because you're not replying. I saw that in their headline, and I wrote it back, and I said, "I don't do this for a living." And at that point, I did it for free. I mean, I only charge $10 a reading now, but
yeah.
I said, I understand your grief, but in grief, we also must understand that people have lives, and we have to exhibit patience, and we have to be kind to others if we are expecting to get something in return. And that's what Spirit teaches us. We have to be kind to each other.
Wow, that's great that you only had to deal with it once. Just some more questions if you don't mind. Do dogs see ghosts? Do dogs, do they see ghosts? Which I know their hearing is super. That's another thing too. I mean, which is the strongest sense for dogs? Do they see ghosts? Do they hear them? Do they smell them? Which is the main sense for them for picking up spirits?
Really, dogs are scent oriented, but they do see them and they do hear them. And some of the things that I've written in all three books are that dogs do have the ability to sense them. I think it was in book 1 that there's a story about how I took Dolly, my Weimaraner, before she passed, on a paranormal investigation, and she helped solve the mystery of one of the spirits that was actually visiting, because she mimicked exactly what it was, a dog in spirit, what the dog used to do when they came in the house. She went exactly the same place, so we were able to figure that out. But I explained about the different physiology that dogs and cats have, and dogs can see faster movement. They can see clearly up to 75 feet away, and up to 200 feet away, it's kind of blurry to them. So they have to be 75 feet to see it clearly. But they can see faster movement. If you're walking your dog, you might not see anything in the trees, but they can see leaves rustling or a squirrel moving, and we don't see anything. I can't tell you how many times what are you looking at? So spirits move at a faster vibration, and we use high-speed cameras in the paranormal field to catch those. But dogs can see them head on. Dogs can also hear them. In the paranormal field, we use digital recorders to pick up different frequencies that we can't even hear, that spirits may speak on. And if you think of a dog whistle, we can't hear a dog whistle, but they can hear it. In terms of scent, that's tricky because dogs are very scent-oriented. If they've lost their sight, for instance, they can still maneuver around a house because they use their nose. Spirits, when they appear, they need a lot of energy, and often they don't come with enough energy to generate sight and scent. So that can freak a dog out because the dog doesn't understand why there's no smell to this spirit.
I read that in this book, and I want to share it with the listeners because it's stuff that seems intuitive, but you have to kind of hear it before you can figure it out. I want to ask you one question because I was talking to a shaman recently, and he had a slump. He deals with demonic depossession. And he went through a slump for a while. And then he had to take a month and a half off, do what he calls downloads, and then his game was back on and he knew how to handle stuff better. Have you, as a pet psychic, have you gone through a period where you were off and you had to re-energize, or has it been pretty much on with you throughout, since Buzz passed?
I think it's been pretty much on. The only time that I can't get messages is when I'm physically sick. And I figured that out. In 2016, Tom and I took a trip to Italy that we've been hoping to go to forever. And I had what turned out to be impacted and infected sinuses that were clogged. And I couldn't smell anything. And I went there with a headache. And when I came back, I wound up having sinus surgery to drain my sinuses. And I was so not good and so sick throughout the trip that I couldn't sense anybody at all. So usually when I'm not feeling well.
I want to ask you a question about meteorology. You have a scientific background, so just a couple quick questions on that, if you don't mind. I live in a place in Massachusetts where it's been crazy. Like, we got a first snowfall in Thanksgiving, and then we had a record snowfall in December, nothing in January, and it's been nuts in February. What are your thoughts on the weather? As a meteorologist, do you see, based on now and maybe 5 or 10 years ago, do you see a real greenhouse effect, or is there a reason that one winter is much worse than another one, and that the weather is so skewed and unpredictable?
Yeah, I will tell you that as a meteorologist, I work with a lot of climatologists during the day, and the climate is warming, the globe is warmed, and this is what happens when the globe warms. We get temperature extremes. So right now in the Arctic, the atmosphere higher up is much, much hotter than than it normally is. And what that does is it displaces the cold air. And the cold air, unfortunately, sinks our way into the U.S. This is the cause of the Arctic outbreaks. And I will tell you, as someone who grew up in the U.S., that I've been living here for over 50 years, these Arctic outbreaks were extremely uncommon up until about 10 years ago. This is what climate change does. It's a reality. It causes extremes. I mean, we also see hotter summers. We see more 100-degree days than we have ever seen in the last 50 years. So colder winters, hotter summers. Don't be fooled by the term global warming. It doesn't mean that every day is going to be hotter, because it's not. It causes extremes. It's actually warmer in Siberia than it is in the U.S.
So with this global warming, is there one part on this planet that's probably the best place to live? Probably has the best climate right now that you would pick to go to for a couple of years?
Yeah, the International Space Station.
Okay.
Continuous climate.
All right. Excellent.
There you
cool.
go.
All right. So, my friend, let's end on two things. What's your next book, and what's your next vacation?
Oh, my gosh. Well, I have 7 books that I'm trying to decide which one to work on next. So it could be Ghosts of Ireland and Scotland on a medium's vacation, because I've been holding that for a while. There will be a Pets in the Afterlife 4.
Awesome.
And that one will be about messages from spirit cats. It'll be all about cats.
You already have a great story, right? Which you started off at the beginning, so that's excellent.
That one's going to be number 1. I've also I had a lot of encounters with different ghosts in Tombstone, Arizona. So I'm thinking about writing a book about that. And I've already been given the go-ahead by the family that manages the Birdcage Theater. More ghosts and spirits, more lessons learned from Talk to the Dead, and kindred spirits too.
That's awesome.
How a medium befriends a spirit. Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of stuff.
And your next vacation? Ireland? Is that where you're going for your next vacation? Or
No, I've already been there.
Okay.
That's why I already have the book almost written. But
all right.
We're hoping to go to Greece.
Oh, wow.
And you know how many dead people are probably walking around there.
Absolutely. And, I'll certainly have it in the notes, but tell us where to follow you and where to buy your amazing books.
Thank you, Bob. People can go to petspirits.com. That's the easiest way to find me. And all my social media links are on the left-hand side of the page. On the right-hand side of the page are all my events and stuff like that. I do a lot of virtual events as well. And anybody that wants to just watch video, podcast, your amazing podcast that we did back last year is on there right up the top. I'm on Amazon.com. Just type in Gutro and all of my books will show up. I have 8 of them. I write them in a very simple, easy way so that anybody can understand them. I may be a scientist, but I don't write like a scientist, because we all read on different levels. And I put my heart in this. So all these books are from the heart.
And it certainly shows. Rob, it's always a pleasure talking to you, and not just because you drive an amazing amount of downloads for my podcast, but because you're such a good guy and you have such great stories. So thank you for taking the time with me today. I wish you nothing but the best in 2021. and I hope the sales blow up for your book. It deserves it. It deserves to be read because it helps so many people.
You're the best. Thank you, Bob. It's always a pleasure, and I look forward to joining you again.
You've been listening to the Afraid of Nothing podcast. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook. Until next time, stay scared.
Hey, you're still here? Great. Then why not listen to another episode? Visit afraidofnothingpodcast.com to peruse all the shows. That's afraidofnothingpodcast.com. And while you're there, click the coffee cup icon to buy me a coffee and leave a review. I'll give you a shout out in an upcoming episode, and the world will know how swell you are.